Hello, good morning, everybody. We are happy to come here together to talk about Christian democratic parties in Europe, in particular in the North and in Germany. And I would like to open by giving Gabriele Baumann, the local representative in the Nordic countries for the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, the floor. Gabriele, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning to all participants. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation branch in Stockholm with responsibility for the Nordic countries. So we hope that we have a lot of participants from all Nordic countries today in order to discuss the development of the Christian democratic parties in the North and compare it with the situation we face and the challenges we face in Germany. Thank you very much for the speakers who joined us today. We started to have this discussion last year, generally, when we wanted to speak about the future of the center-right parties in the region, and always in comparison to what's going on in Europe and within the framework of the European People's Party. So we started then, we continued with the seminar last year with Douglas Brommesson as well, on the comparison of the Christian Democratic Union in Germany and the Christian Democratic parties in the north of Europe. And today we would like to continue this discussion based on a report which has been written by Douglas Brommesson for the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation in Stockholm. Thank you again, Douglas, for joining us today, and thank you also Gregor Ryssel for joining us today. You will be both later presented by Lars Hänsel. Lars Hänsel is my colleague from Berlin. He is the head of the Europe and North America department at the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation in Berlin. And before he started this position, he was representative of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation in the United States. Lars, I would like to give the floor back to you, please.
Thank you very much, Gabriele. I'm very happy to moderate this discussion today, this morning. We have our discussion about the Christian democratic parties, about center-right parties in a very specific time, in a time when Christian democratic parties in Europe are not in a very strong position. Of course, there are exceptions. In Germany, we just lost an election. In the Nordic countries, the fate of the Christian democratic parties was always more difficult. So we have a soul searching in Germany now when we look inside, also for the future of our party, but we also look outside. Today, our discussion will be taking also the Nordic example. And we are very happy to have two very distinguished panelists and experts to discuss this topic. First, we have Dr. Douglas Brommesson, and he is the professor at the Department of Political Science at Linnaeus University. Previously, he was also at Lund University, and he approaches our topic this morning from a specific academic point of view. Douglas is an expert in various fields, in particular on foreign policy, but he specializes also on religion and politics, and in particular also on party politics. So he is well suited to discuss our topic of today. He has a very long list of publications. If I would go through, we wouldn't have time to talk to him anymore. So I will only mention one paper that was already mentioned that will be the base for our discussion this morning. And he will talk about Nordic variation of Christian democracy, a comparison of Christian democratic parties in the North. The second expert, and I'm also very happy to have him here, is Dr. Gregor Ryssel. He is an old friend in the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. Not only an old friend, he's also already an old hand in the foundation, since he had different positions working in different fields, Middle East, Asia, different areas. He also represented the foundation abroad in Uzbekistan, and he is now serving in a new think tank unit in the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. But what is even more important to introduce him here is Gregor will approach our topic of this morning from a political practitioner's perspective. And this is bringing something new to the table, since he was involved in local politics and being also the head of a regional party unit. So we will be happy to listen what he has to bring in from his perspective. Only a couple remarks on housekeeping. We will have this discussion on a Zoom stream now. You are welcome to use the Q&A function to ask your question. We will be happy to go into these questions later, and I would encourage you to ask many questions to our experts. And what I also wanted to mention is that we will not have a Chatham House rules. We are among ourselves, of course, but we will later load this up on Facebook, and so that you can go back and go in this discussion again. So thank you very much. I would first give the floor to Douglas to introduce his paper and what he has to bring in from his perspective. Thank you very much, Douglas.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and for the opportunity to write this report and present it to you today. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion with all of you, and also, of course, to listen to Gregor's presentation later on here. I would like to try to share my screen. Let's see if the technology is on my side today. And now you should see it, I hope. Okay, so my report then has the title Nordic Variation of Christian Democracy, a comparison of Christian democratic parties in the North. This report is, one could say, the extension or the continuation of other pieces I have written, in particular on Swedish Christian democracy, but this time I had the opportunity to compare the development within the Swedish Christian democracy with the other Nordic Christian democratic parties. What I basically do in the report, and what I would like to say a few words about here, is that I address what I call the structural challenges facing Nordic Christian democracy. And these challenges are, of course, facing Christian democracy in general, but I would say in particular the Nordic Christian democracy. I also address challenges in election, weakening election results for Nordic Christian democracy, Christian democratic parties. I address the strategies that the Christian democratic parties in the Nordic have used in order to face those challenges and to change their development towards a more positive voter turnout. And finally, I would say a few words also about the future of Nordic Christian democracy and the most strategic choice these parties have to make. But if I start with the structural challenges then, one can say that in the literature, at least, and the research on Christian democracy in Europe, there are three structural challenges that reoccur in the discussion: secularization, individualization, and also a weakened relation between civil society organizations and parties. Starting with secularization, we understand that as the process through which different parts of societies and cultures are separated from the influence of religious institutions and symbols. That's a definition coming from Peter Berger, world famous sociologist and a theorist on secularization. And this process becomes a challenge for Christian democracy for quite obvious reasons, I would say, because these parties are building their politics on a Christian philosophy that now is becoming less visible in society and is no longer a natural part of the everyday life of the voters. The reference to the Christian heritage is no longer obvious for the general voter. The second structural challenge, individualization, implies a process where stable collective communities are weakened. These communities have often been stable for a long time, and they have formed the basis for political movements with lifelong members. It can be the the labor movement, it could be agrarian movements, or it could be Christian movements, or any other kind of political movements that are based on stable communities. So this is true for then many different forms of parties, including the Christian Democratic parties. But furthermore, for Christian democracy, it is an additional challenge, since the Christian democratic ideology is, I would say, almost anti-individualistic in its nature, because of its strong emphasis on small communities and families as the basic unit of society. The third challenge concerns then the weakened relation between civil society organizations and parties. Here we see how citizens detach themselves from old civil society organizations. Many kinds of civil society organizations have quite hard time today to find new members, and especially to find active members, I would say. Of particular interest here for the Nordic Christian Democratic parties is the relationship to the Free Church movement, that for long formed the main recruitment base for members of the Christian Democratic parties in the Nordic, in contrast to the continental Christian Democratic people parties, I would say. So when this Free Church movement started to lose members, it potentially also implied a loss of people to recruit into the parties. Although this Free Church movement, today at least, is a rather small group in society in general, the members of these Free Churches have for long been the backbone of the Nordic Christian Democratic parties. I would say with a very high degree of loyalty and active participation in party work. So when the attachment or the relationship with that movement becomes weaker, that also implies less people that will take active part in party work and election campaigns. Another way to illustrate these structural challenges is to look at the very famous Ingelhart-Welzel World Culture Map. I hope you can see it on the screen. Maybe it's a little bit small here, but I'm quite sure you are well familiar with it. In the upper right corner, we have the Nordic countries, especially Denmark, Sweden, and Norway stand out as quite extreme cases compared to the global mean values in terms of high degree of secularism and high degree of self-expression values. In other words, the Nordic countries are highly secular and highly individualistic, and I would say that forms also a structural challenge for Christian democracy that is not as individualistic as the mean values in the societies where they are active, and they are not as secular as the mean citizen is in those societies. So that's 4 different ways to describe the structural challenges. Another way then to address the challenges is to look at the election results of these parties. Here we have the 4 Christian Democratic parties in Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. I should say that the Nordic, of course, also includes Iceland, but Iceland does not have an active Christian Democratic movement. So we just relate to the 4 countries of Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden here. As you can see, the tendency has been quite negative, especially I would say in Norway and Sweden, also in Denmark, but the Danish party is rather small, so I won't say that much about the Danish party here, but even if they had a more positive election results in 2019, I think it was, it's still on very, very low levels. But if we look especially at Norway and Sweden, we see a relatively well synchronized development of the election results. And to some extent, we do that in all 4 countries. From the late 1980s or early 1990s, we saw a positive development up until the early 2000s. There was a major breakthrough in Sweden in 1998. There was a return to the levels of the all-time high from the 1970s in Norway, where I would say also the Christian Democrats had been a serious political force much longer compared to the other 3 countries, much because they started much earlier. And we saw more modest but still positive developments also in Finland and Denmark. From the early 2000s, the development has once again been rather well synchronized, but now in negative terms for these parties, when the Nordic Christian Democrats have all struggled to maintain their parliamentary representation. We saw that most recently in Norway, when the party lost their, most of their seats, at least in the parliament. They have 3 seats because of their regional representation, but that's it. So both structural challenges in terms of values in society and challenges then that are manifested in election results. If we look at the different ways these parties then have tried to face those challenges, there are of course different ways to describe that, but I have, based on previous research actually on the Dutch Christian Democratic parties, the CDA, research from Kees van Kersbergen, Dutch political scientist, tried to form a model based on 2 dimensions. The first dimension consists of confessional inspired ideas versus secular inspired ideas. Here we have, on one hand, political ideas that are based on religious thinking. On the other hand, we have political ideas based on secular thinking that are detached from an explicit religious tradition, at least. The second dimension concerns universalism versus particularism, where the universalist position puts emphasis on the general, where, for example, rights are motivated based on the receiver's status as a human being, while the particularistic position instead puts focus on the belonging to a certain group, or a community, or a nation. In this 2-dimensional universe of Christian democratic ideas, we can find different positions combining different preferences according to the 2 dimensions. And here I have then 4 different alternatives in a Christian democratic ideological space. Communitarian liberalism, coming close to more cosmopolitanism. We have conservatism, or a more communitarian tradition, standing to the right. We have Christian social tradition, a more centrist position, and maybe also the more traditional position of Christian democracy in the north. And we have, and I would say maybe to a lesser degree, Christian nationalism or Christian rights thinking. We haven't, at least up until now, seen much of that in the Nordic countries, but maybe there are some tendencies in that direction now appearing, at least, but we can return to that. And I have, in my previous research, showed how the Swedish Christian Democrats have moved from the Christian social tradition towards more of conservatism or a communitarian tradition. And I will return to that for the other parties shortly here. So if we look then at the ideological development at the party level, we see both variation and joint strategies among the Nordic Christian Democratic parties. Looking at Sweden, as I said, I have showed how the party has moved towards less Christian inspiration and towards a more particularistic profile. And I would argue that this tendency have now accelerated. In Norway, we see similar tendencies, but I would say those tendencies are still weaker. The party is much more divided. In Sweden, the move towards a more communitarian or conservative profile have been supported by a majority, quite clear majority in the party. But in Norway, it's been a very divided party, almost 50-50, when the party has discussed these issues, especially the party leader then had to leave, and several members of the party left the party altogether. In Finland, I would say there is a high degree of stability, in particular in terms of election results, but also in ideological profile, at least compared to the Nordic friends. In Denmark, the party has been torn between liberal and conservative wings and have since 2005 played a minor role in Danish politics. But there are some tendencies today. The party has actually returned to the parliament, not because of their own strength, but because the defector from the Social Liberal Party has now joined the Christian Democrats. So they are back in parliament, but yeah, we'll see what that means for the future. Another way to look at the ideological change is to look at the references in party manifesto. This is data from the party manifesto project that code all political party manifestos in Europe. This is references to what is called traditional morality in party manifestos. And we see that such references are becoming less common in all four parties. Another indicator is positive references to internationalism, where we can see, with the exception of Denmark, that such references are also becoming less common. So we can see that the trend, based on this data at least, is that the Nordic Christian Democrats goes in the direction of less confessional inspiration and a more particularistic position. However, I would say, as we have seen also in the discussion on the internal debates, there are examples that to some extent show how both Christian inspiration and universalist positions are well alive in some of the parties, especially in Finland, to some extent also in Norway. Still, despite these examples, the trend, I think, is to be found in a direction of a more limited importance of this heritage. So saying a few words then about the future of Nordic Christian democracy as a way to conclude this, I would say the parties have a difficult position. There is internal division, especially in Norway, but to some extent also in Sweden, and earlier also in Denmark. In Finland, the Christian Democrats have chosen a more modest approach and have relied on their core constituency, securing stable election results, but also limiting the possibilities for any considerable increase in the number of votes. The rise of the populist right constitutes another particular challenge, with new parties talking about traditional values, but in a new way. The choice then, I think, facing Nordic Christian democracy is to choose between being a light version of these populist parties or becoming, or returning maybe, to a Christian democratic profile at the center of politics. So thank you very much. That was my remarks.
Okay, Douglas, thank you very much for your thorough discussion and presentation of the Nordic Christian Democratic parties, mapping the parties and outlining some of the major challenges of secularization and individualism, but also giving some answers and describing some of the answers the parties give in this situation. Before we discuss this further, I would like to give the floor now to Dr. Gregor Ryssel and ask him to join in from his perspective. Thank you very much. He's not there.
You have to
Okay. Now
I hope we didn't lose him.
No, I'm here. So yeah, Lars, thank you very much for that, and Gabriele, thank you very much for the invitation. to be a part of this process concerning Christian democracy in the northern part of Europe. And of course, thank you very much to the professor for the study, because I learned a lot from this more or less 10 pages, especially the references at the end of the paper of the pages are also very interesting in order to come a little bit deeper into this issue. So first of all, I will start and I will agree from my point of view, the secularization and the individualization, which you mentioned on the directly on the first page of the study, is the same in Germany. So especially the secularization is going ahead in a high speed, because what I do think is, especially against the background of the pandemic, we are more believing in science than in religion. So something changed, and it comes to the point, who is doing policy? That's the scientists in the future or the politicians? That means who will influence whom? And what will the people believe? I mean, they are voting for politicians, but the politicians have some consultants, and these are from the field of the science. So the question is now, where is the limit? I'm believing what the scientists are saying, or at the end of the day, there's still a rest that the scientists cannot explain, and I'm still believing in religion. So that means the secularization is also going on, and this touches the CDU in a very highly way, because we are connected with the C Christian Democratic Union, even in the name of the party with this first letter C. D Democratic Union, this is not, it's also important, but concerning secularization, it's coming to the C, and this is coming to the heart of the party. What does it mean, this C, if the secularization is going ahead? So, and this is exactly the point that we are discussing now. What is a C? What does C means? And with this Christian name, or with this Christian word, we have to connect some values. And this is the next question. What does that mean, Christian democratic or conservative values? I mean, the value per se is a neutral value, because at the end of the day, socialists can occupy this value, or even the conservatives as well. So that means we have to characterize our values in a conservative or Christian democratic way, which is actually not very easy, because I'm coming back to the beginning, because of this secularization and because of a trend, I would say, of a trend of scientification. That means we are everything looking under the umbrella or through the glasses of a scientist, of science. This brings some challenges and some changes to the society. And from my point of view, we do not know at this moment how we can deal with that. So at the end of the day, we will have a democratic union without a C in the future, or we are going back to define what does a C means. The individualization has some other aspects from my point of view. The individualization, we have to make sure that this is not to bring down institutions of a democratic state. If everything depends on yourself, on the individualization, on the individuum, then we have to see that we still have strong institutions in the system, because otherwise we will lose some order and some order in the state. So let me go through this. So one more point to this secularization. From my point of view, even in Germany, we have a strong Green Party. And I mean, there are some links to this Green Party concerning nature and concerning environment, and that means also there we have to see is that going on the scientification, or is that coming back to a religious aspect? So there are some thinkings how we are dealing with the world. This is we have no world B. This is a phrase of that. But we are still not defined in the party. We are in which direction we should go, and a lot will depend on the next president or of the next chairman of the party that will be elected very soon. And as far as I see the situation, it's exactly two or a lot of parts into the party, and we have now to, I will not say to redefine the political platform, but we have to find out in what direction we will go with this C, especially with this C, Christian Democratic. So it's inside of the party. We have the discussion: should that be a more conservative party, or more, let's say, moderate party, or a more, secularized party? And that brings us to the point: if we not want to have a more religion or more party that does politics from a religion aspect, then what will we be maybe on the right part or on the right side of the CDU in the future? I mean, we have already the AfD now. Is this because we went too much to the left or to the center, or is that because of other reasons? So that means we are just discussing also inside the party who is, let's say, guilty in the sense that we will have a new party at the right side of the Christian Democratic Union. And connected with this is, of course, that they are thinking that the values, conservative values, they will steal the conservative values from the CDU and put to their party platform. So, and you see, everything is in a certain way, in a certain sense, in a movement. So we have not a defined party that will say, okay, we're going this direction and that's it. We have, in a certain way, to discuss it inside of the party, and then we have to come out with a party platform, and we have to talk to the people in a very clear way what we did and what we want to do in the future with this party. So concerning a movement of Christian democratic parties, what I do think is, yes, there are not only separated parties, Sweden, Norway, Finland, the Scandinavian countries, Italy or France or Germany. Somehow I do think that we should have an interest to build up a European, or even more than a European movement from Christian democratic parties, because on the other side, the socialist parties, we have a very strong construct of all these parties coming into one organization. Even there's one organization in South America, in Africa, in Asia, and so on. So that means we have to see that there are also other parties, other platforms that we have to, let's say, to fight against, or to convince people to vote for us and not for them. And that and I do think that makes more sense to do that together with other political parties in a framework of EDU or whatever. So at the end of maybe my remarks, I want to say that there are a lot of topics in this 10 pages that are similar or even exactly the same to Germany from my point of view. I think I find some some phrases or some formulations that could be directly come to the German discussion and could be fit into the German discussion. Very interesting, and therefore I do think it is one reason more to to go a process like the Adenauer Foundation is doing it, to have a bright network of parties that are close to our party platform, and to exchange opinions about the process of politics in the different European countries. So I learned a lot from this paper, and I will go through the references and to come a little bit deeper into this thing, into this Christian democracy in the north of Europe. So thank you very much. Maybe this for the beginning, and then I'm of course open for all the questions.
Yeah, Gregor, thank you very much for your remarks. Thanks both again. Gregor, well, I think it was very important to go in particular into the question of the role of religion in party politics, and also making the point that we need international cooperation. What I found interesting in both of your presentations is that you both touched upon the role of religion and secularization and the challenges emanating from that. But as far as I understood you, I mean, it was more of a description of the challenge we face at the moment. Gregor, you mentioned that we don't have answers yet. And before we, broadly discuss it also with our viewers, I would challenge you on this a little bit more. You alluded a little bit to this, but I wanted to ask you the question: what do you think, in order to be successful in the future, since parties want to win elections, what do you think need to be done, in particular when we look into the question of religion? Do we need to change the product? I mean, do we need to be less religious in our party platforms to be attractive to people to be voted on? Or do you think it's more a question of the marketing? So do we need to present ourselves better to the people and being more accessible, maybe using more new technologies, different platforms, different new formats? Do you think, I mean, that's the short question would be, do you think it's more the product or it's more the marketing in order to be successful in the future in a society where religion plays less of a role in the future? Thank you very much.
Is that going to me or to the professor?
Both of you.
Then please the professor first of all.
Okay, Douglas, why don't you start? Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And thank you also, Gregor, for your excellent comments. Well, if it's the product or the marketing, well, maybe it's hard for me as an outsider to judge, but I would say that I think the language that the Christian Democratic parties have used from the Christian tradition has become less obvious for the general citizen to understand or to relate to, as I said. That doesn't necessarily mean that the content of that message is irrelevant or not possible to understand. But maybe then, as you say, Lars, maybe it's more about the marketing, how you describe it. What vocabulary are you using when you are describing that Christian heritage? If we look at, for example, if we look at Sweden, that is closest to me, we see that the Swedes are some of the most loneliest people on earth. They are living in the highest degree of single households, and we see also a very high degree of psychiatric illnesses, and well, many people are facing the challenges of loneliness. And then for a party that is emphasizing small communities, families, belonging together based on Christian thinking, well, for me, it's hard to see that should be irrelevant, but I guess it's more about how you describe it and how you approach that heritage and how you show that it is relevant. We can see from research, I referred earlier to the Dutch Christian Democratic Party, CDA, and when they had lower election results in the 1990s, they tended to go to the right and also towards more of conservatism, but that wasn't the success story. Then they returned to their more old profile in the center, but based on a more modern approach, maybe. And that was a more successful strategy. Then after that, they have faced new challenges, I know that, but still, that may be a relevant case, especially I would say for the Nordic countries that are, I think, the Netherlands and the Nordic countries are similar in many ways in degree of secularization and so forth. So, yeah, for me, I think we see many tendencies in society where Christian democratic thinking may be relevant, but where the language has not always been that easy to relate. You are muted, Lars.
Gregor, thank you very much, Douglas. Gregor, what would be your answer?
Well, it's of course a difficult question, Lars, and it's maybe the 1 million question for the CDU at that time. So I have my personal opinion of that. That means but I will put it away or try to put this personal opinion away for a moment. I mean, what I do think is the link between the Christian Democratic Union and the religion was somehow a secure and a good link, because everybody could go back to the religion and say, well, we are coming from this religion, Catholic Church, and this of also how we are doing politics. So this was in the past, and we got some orientation from that. And in our minds, this religion orientation, we transferred that to politics. And this was the formulation was that we are doing Christian democratic, that we are a party that is doing from a Christian democratic motivation politics and doing something for the society. We are not a Christian democratic really a Christian democratic party. We're doing from a Christian democratic motivation all our things. So now it comes to some scandals especially in the Catholic Church, and this moral aspect, to go back and to see what the church is saying concerning political actions, is going down. That means we do not trust anymore, or the people do not trust anymore religion, even to say, or better to say, the church, what the church is saying. So the church lost influence in this case. And now we can discuss is that good or bad. I will not directly say this is bad, but I also not would directly say this is good or too good or whatever. This is a question where we want to go. And this is again the question probably also of the next chairman of the party. So that means, yes, we are somehow in between both, more religion, less religion, more secularization, even more secularization, or less secularization. But the party has to decide that by its own and by discussion of its member. And that will be a very interesting discussion. But what we can say is that, of course, the religion, the churches, I will even not say the religion, this is maybe not too, this is a little bit not too exact. The churches lost influence, and the people do not trust anymore the churches, the institution church. I will not say that the people are not believing anymore, no. Even the opposite is probably the thinking, because a lot of people do think, oh, politics that's probably not all, something is coming beyond, or wherever something is there's more than only politics, and the people are not able to do everything, and even to do things that in former time we thought, okay, this is somehow coming to connected with God, so the society goes in both directions. More religion to say, okay, we do need some orientation, less to say we overcame that, we do not need anymore the church. So that means we can solve our problems by ourselves, without any church, without any Bible, without any religion. So, but at the end, it comes to the question: what does the CDU wants to, or which way, or what direction the party wants to go. And this is exactly the point where we are standing now, and we have to discuss that. So if this is the last sentence, my personal opinion is we need some more orientation. The world became very brutal and very quickly. Everything is going very quickly and somehow easily. And we are going always forward, not thinking back, not thinking from where we are coming, and so therefore what I do think is we need some orientation, and for me this orientation is 100% 100% sure, also not only but also a religious orientation. I'm not saying church, that the church will give me this orientation, but the religion.
Okay, thank you very much, Gregor. I can see that we have now a number of questions, and we have to see, how much we, will be able to answer, since we have another roughly half an hour, short half an hour. There were some questions that were related to, but they are a little bit more specific. There's one question: how do you see the influence of the Lutheran teaching on different regimes? Gregor, you touched upon it a little bit when you talked about religion and church. Is it too difficult for citizens to understand the core identity of Christian democratic parties, the Christian view on man? So would you be able to answer this question?
Yeah, well, this goes a little bit to coming back to your question in the beginning, Lars, what we do need, a product or the marketing. So if we do know what product we have, then we need a good marketing. That it's maybe a very diplomatic answer, but this is what I do believe. So at first we have to find out, to define what is our product and what will be the product, not for tomorrow and after tomorrow, but for a longer period. Because convincing people in order to vote for CDU is not a job for tomorrow after tomorrow, it's a long-term job. So this is the first thing. And the second thing is, then we need a good marketing. A good marketing, what does that mean? That has a little bit the touch to say, okay, the product is very heavy, very difficult, so, and somehow we are doing it easier for people to understand it. Yeah. In a certain way, conservative or Christian democratic values are not easy to understand. Even if you have on the other side socialist ideas, which could be defined from my point of view more easy and not so difficult and not so difficult as our values. So that means, yeah, we need the product, and then we need a good marketing, and we need a narrative. Everything is going through a special narrative. If you are able to build a narrative, then at the end, even this is a horror, at the end the product is not important. If the press and if everybody will say this is A, but in reality it's B, then at the end of the day, the people are believing that it is A, So that means we have to tell the people what is our product in easy words that they will understand it, and in very attractive words that they will say, oh, social market economy, to take care about people who lost something because of several reasons. Oh, this is conservative. I didn't thought that. I didn't expect that. This is I always thought, oh, conservative, this is politics from 100 years ago. So this we have to explain to people. Is that maybe coming to this question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this could be part of the answer. If the person who asked the question wants to, continue into a different direction, you're invited to use the Q&A function. There is another question, and this one I would like to address to Douglas. Actually, there are two questions. Maybe I can combine them because they go in the same direction or a similar direction. Since you talked about individualistic tendencies, there's one question: if you are a party in the middle, is it not difficult to raise identity from political issues which already have their moral radical representatives? And there's a similar question with an increasingly secular culture and society where traditional values are losing ground. Will there be room for Christian democratic parties to be more populistic voice on behalf of families and conservative local communities against the cultural and political elite and their solutions? So it goes into the question of identity and individualistic values. Douglas.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also saw there was a question from Tony on the relative high of the Nordic Christian Democracy in the late 1990s. I think my answer related to that a little bit, so maybe I touch upon that as well.
Okay.
I never said anything about this during the presentation, but I do write in the report about the relationship to the left-right spectrum or the scale. At least in the Nordic countries, the Christian Democratic parties for long refused to position themselves on the left-right dimension. They always claimed that they were somewhere beyond that. They were positioning themselves on another dimension. And that was, of course, based then on the Christian thinking and on other kind of issues then. And still that was translated into some kind of centrist position. If we look at the time when these parties had their best days in the late 1990s, especially in Norway and Sweden, with almost 12% in Sweden and I think almost 14% in Norway, if I remember correctly now. They managed somehow to combine quite traditional values when it came to like family values, the respect for or the view on the human person, with rather centrist positions on economic affairs and welfare policies, and also strong support for international foreign aid and stuff like that. Strong support for human rights abroad so it's quite radical in some ways, quite conservative in other ways. And I would say that was also, if we look at election studies from that time, that was also something that was well appreciated by the voters. So maybe it wasn't that impossible then to combine the position in the middle, that is maybe not that radical, with more radical views in terms of conservative values then, or maybe not radical, but conservative at least, being special at least. So I don't know if the position in the center by definition is something that was impossible to combine with a unique profile. We can also see that in several of these cases, we saw how other parties gathered in the center, and then it became harder maybe. And in the Swedish case, for example, the Christian Democrats then moved to the right to get a unique profile. But when they did, just 1 or 2 years later, the moderates and the Swedish Democrats, returned to that position. So suddenly they were stuck in a very crowded right-wing position. And what that tells me is maybe that it is very hard for quite small parties to act that strategically on the left-right scale. Maybe it's more important than to keep their profile, to have a stable ideological profile, so the voters over time learn what it means to be a Christian Democratic Party. Because if the parties change all the time, then it's of course hard to understand that position. I don't know if that was an answer to all those questions, but at least my first try. So yeah.
I have a question here that is going in the same direction. I would like to address it to Gregor. Whereas religion is less and less of a mega trend, values very much are a trend. People and organizations seek meaning to their work, which can be seen in the Green Movement and the populist movement, for instance. How could Christian democracy be more successful, rebranded from religion to values? Gregor, can you say something about that one?
Yeah. Well, this first of all, I wanted to make a first remark. From my point of view, the only party who is possible, that is possible to act in the center, is a conservative or a Christian Democratic Party, because if you see how we are handling problems, political problems, I mean Christian Democratic parties, then that means we are always trying to define compromises between both between different opinions. So that means the conservatives and the Christian Democratic, I mean, I'm speaking from Germany, of course, have the, or what they are able to do is to bring people together with a compromise, and the compromise can only be somewhere in the middle. So, and the second thing is, and this is why we are we have very problems with to bring out or to write out a conservative or a Christian Democrat. Even we have to define probably what does that mean, conservative and Christian Democrat, because this is not both the same, you know. But okay, this is more for the for a seminar in the university or somewhere. I mean, what we are even always doing is to see, okay, what is in the interest of the people. You know, this is the strength of a conservative and a Christian Democratic Party. We are not we are not telling the people, okay, we are the Green Party and we have to build up new energy, whatever, and everything is coming under this idea. No, what we are going to do is we are looking to both people, or to the problem, to different opinions, and then trying to bring in the sense of the people the opinions in the middle together. So, and therefore, and from there we are named, you know, somehow party of the center, center right, whatever, but center in the middle. The compromise is in the middle, without ideology or without, you know, is in the middle. So now to the thing, rebranded from religion to values. First of all, I do think there is not a big difference between values and values that are religion or coming from a religion background. What we do need is, we need a rebrand, yes, indeed. The first thing is we need a narrative that says conservative or conservatism is not from yesterday. Conservatism is more modern than we are thinking. And then we have to bring out some examples of that. As I said in the beginning, social market economy, for example. What are the values in social market economy that are typical Christian Democratic or typical for a Christian Democratic Party? So, environment, for example. What is the typical thing of what is, you know, the sense, the Christian Democratic point of that? We didn't do that in the past. In the past, this is my personal point of view, we collected voters. We tried to collect as much as possible voters to elect for CDU. We didn't explain to the people what are our values and what is our kind to do, or our way to do, to find a compromise. So therefore, it's not on the one side values, on the other side religion. No, we have to be very, you know, we have to explain that in a very clearly way, that also religion values could be very good to find or to solve political problems. This is what we didn't do in the past.
Okay, thank you very much, Gregor. There is one question that goes into the question you also touched upon of terminology. You know, what terminology do we should we use? Should it be conservative, Christian Democratic? What is a good, you know, is it marketing or is it content when we talk about conservative or Christian Democratic? And I would like to ask this question to Douglas. You know, I'm sure you saw the question in the Q&A section. You know, I find the word conservative, it says here, or conservative values, a little bit problematic. And then asking the question, what could be used instead? Actually, I wanted to ask both of you. I mean, Douglas, from a more academic point of view, What do you think about this terminology? And maybe later, Gregor, you want to sort it out from your practical point of view again. Thank you. Douglas, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think the Tapio here asking the question has its point. If we look at research, especially on, I would say, on welfare state policies, because that's where the consequences of these terms have been elaborated the most, I would say. We within political science often discuss the continental model, which I would say is a Christian democratic model. And we have the conservative model, which is Thatcherism in the United Kingdom. And then we have the Scandinavian model, which is social democracy, basically. And I think those three welfare models describe the difference quite well between Christian democracy on one hand and conservatism on the other hand. Where conservatism within the welfare sector, I would say, is much more open to market solutions, where the market is basically the basic unit, while in the Christian democratic tradition, the family and the civil society organizations are the basic units, and in Sweden it's the state, or in Scandinavia. And I think that somehow helps us to orient ourselves in the understanding here. Another way also to compare conservatism with Christian democracy is to ask ourselves what values are at the center of policies. I would say in conservatism, it's the values that have built the society, no matter what values. If we are in India, it will be Hindu values, right? If we are in a Muslim country, it would be Muslim values. If we are in a Christian country, it would be Christian values. But according to Christian democracy, it's not a choice. It's always Christian values because they are true. They are what constitutes the truth in society. So it's more universalistic. It's more objective in its claims to truth. So I think that's quite different, actually. It's not because they have always been there. It's because people believing in these values see them as the truth. A little bit more radical, I would say, in their view on the content of these values.
Thank you very much, Douglas. Gregor, you want to relate to this as well?
Well, I mean, I agree with you, with the professor, that the Christian values are a main part of the society in Europe and so on. But if you are bullshit, we are living in a modern world. I mean, this is not my opinion, but you can hear that very often. So, but I'm coming back to this question. This was from Tapio somehow, yeah. Yes, I agree. Conservative values have a negative connotation. First of all, we have to think about from where this negative connotation is coming and who did this connotation. This is the first thing. And then we have to redefine this connotation with examples. And this is the point. What I do think is that the people also inside of the party, yes, it's somehow an academic discussion. We are Christian Democrats, we are conservatives, we are half-half, we have whatever. The main point is that the people will understand that we are able to solve problems. This is the main point, and even problems that are touching themselves. So, and then this is not this. It's not the most important thing. We are offering conservative or Christian democratic solutions. The most important point for them is that at the end of the day, the problem will be solved. And that brings me to the point. This is somehow also Christian democratic because from my point of view, it's always what we are doing. The person should be in the center of our action, of our doing. So we have always to see what is even the single person thinking about that. And we are doing politics because we want to change or we want to make world better, for person, for real person, not in an abstract way, but for person, because we are thinking this is coming from God and this is a singular person and so on. That means if we are doing our things against the background that we want to help people and they will feel it, they will say, oh, the CDU solved for me, or for a lot of people, but for me especially, I can see it, I can feel it, solved some problem. Then at the end, it is not important, conservative, Christian Democrats or whatever. We can then tell them, listen, for us, the person, you as a person are in the middle of our, in the center of our thinking, then fine. But at the end, but the priority is to make life better for people. This is why they will vote for us at the end.
Thank you very much. Very practical answer. I have here a question that takes us a little bit further in asking the question about what is the role of leadership? What role leaders play to give face to the party? And I would like to broaden this question a little bit. The question is, you know, what is the relationship between leadership of a party and taking into consideration what the people want? Sometimes you need to lead and to maybe lead into a different direction from what people want. I know it goes a little bit beyond of this question, but I think the question of leadership we should briefly discuss here before we then slowly come to a close. And I would like to ask Douglas first, and then maybe also Gregor can say something about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's an important question, especially when it comes to the Nordic Christian Democrats. As I asked here in the question, there have been at least two very strong examples, Kjell Magne Bondevik in Norway and Alf Svensson in Sweden. Normally, we as political scientists say that the party leader don't have that much to do with election results. It's always about political preferences. But I would say in these two cases, they really managed to raise or to increase the number of votes for their parties. What one could say is that in a way, I wouldn't use the word populist because it has such a negative connotation, but they were really leaders that were based out among the people, and they traveled a lot, they met a lot of people, and they were not seen as part of the elite, I would say. They were seen as one among us, and I think that had something to do with it. I also think it had to do with their Christian background, because they grew up, or especially Alf Svensson, I would say, but also Kjell Magne Bondevik as a minister, they grew up within the church, used to speak to people. They had their audience. They trained when they were young to speak before people. So they were speakers, really. I think that had a lot to do with how they succeeded as party leaders. But I think we return here to the question also about the role of ideology. Should you follow or should you lead? And I think what made them so trusted was that people saw that they didn't change their views overnight. They were quite stable in their ideological profile. If they changed, it was after quite strong or a long term of consideration. So quite stable, and in that way they were true leaders, and I think that also gave them some respect. And they are still. I know more about Alf Svensson, but some about Kjell Magne Bondevik as well, and they are quite respected leaders to this day. Because
okay, thank you very much, Douglas. Gregor?
Yes, again, if we are talking about people and about persons, and we are talking about leadership, then we have also to talk about responsibility. That means if I am a leader, let's say chairman of the party, then I have a lot of responsibility in an abstract way for the party, but in a very concrete way for the people. Because I'm not as 86 million other people in a million people in Germany. I'm one of these million people. I'm the chairman of the party, and if I'm coming out with some words, then the people will listen that in a different way than somebody is telling that. So that means with my words and with the action that I'm doing, I have a lot of responsibility for people. And that brings me to the point that it's not, it's leading, but it's also, from my point of view, maybe mainly of the time of a chairman, it's also managing different opinions inside of the party. I mean, it's coming now to the word Volkspartei in German. I mean, People's Party, which is not directly the same. But if I'm leading a Volkspartei, People's Party, then I have to manage a lot of very different opinions, trying to bring them together. And this is a mixture of to do it in a responsibility of leadership, but also to manage it in the sense to find compromises. And this is maybe more a managing job in a Volkspartei than, for example, in a strong centralized party where the leader says, okay, we are going this way, full stop, and everybody who is not for me is against me, go out of the party. So socialist parties, communistic parties, and so on. But this is not the model that we are based on. Our model is more to integrate in the middle of the spectrum the political opinions, the different political opinions, in order to find a solution for the people. That means direct or concrete answer, yes, leadership with responsibility for the people who are in the party and for the people to whom I'm making the politics based on my platform.
Yeah, Gregor, thank you very much. I think this would merit an extra seminar, the role of leadership in a party. We have a few minutes also to go into another topic that also would merit a different seminar, but I would like to mention it anyway and would like to ask you for a brief comment on that one as well. And this goes to the question of education. Somebody asked here, if people in future lose knowledge about Christian values, how can we then explain the Christian democratic values? Again, I mean, the Adenauer Foundation is about education. There are some strategies to answer this, but I would like to give you briefly the floor for the next 2 minutes to say something about this. And I would like to start with Douglas, please, and then Gregor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's a question for the parties to address, but I mean, it is also the difference between values and the language we use to describe the values. The values can be sound and can be attractive, but the language we have to describe them may not be attractive. So I think that returns to the question we started with: marketing or substance. But how to choose and how to define them, well, I leave that to the parties. But thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Gregor?
Okay, last 120 seconds. I mean, education is really a big problem. And to make it very short, I have no idea how to solve that. I mean, at the end of the day, it should be a consensus in the society that we have to work hard for a good and even better education of young people, because I mean, this is one of the big issues in Germany, to give an education that does not mean only to go to Wikipedia and to look what is written there, even if this is not the truth and so on. The problem is not to find information, but to understand if this information is right, or if this is the truth, or if this is not the truth. And this will be maybe the question for the future. How can I bring the people, the young people, to a process that they will ask themselves, is that right what I'm reading there, or is that maybe not the truth? To think about it, to reflect that. This is actually not, from my point of view, not a question of the political party. That is at the end an exercise, a job of the society. So that was 130 seconds. Sorry for the 10 seconds.
Okay, thank you very much, Gregor. I would like to thank you all again, Douglas and Gregor in particular, for discussing today's topic. I would like to thank the local office of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, Gabriele Baumann, for initiating this conference here. I would like to thank also Mr. Horsen, who made this possible also from his point of view. I think we covered a lot of territory. It was a fascinating discussion. And since we looked into those complex questions like the role of religion in society and also in party politics, it's natural that we could only touch upon it, that we could touch upon also some of the elements. And we had to leave some questions open for next discussions. And I think that the balance between the product and the marketing, as we put it, this will be decisive also for the future success of the parties winning elections again. And again, thank you very much for what you put on the table. I think this will be a starting point also for future discussions. And I thank you all and wish you all the best. And thanks also for the viewers and for the active participation in questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation and best regards to Sweden. So hopefully it's not too cold there.
Same weather to all.
So bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.